hold on. I'm calling her right now. Alex Press, for those of you who don't know, is a brilliant labor journalist. She's one of the best. She writes for Jacobin, of course, which is, she's CIA. Calling you now. And, oh, there she is. Okay, hold on. I'm going to turn off my camera real quick and then 1 second and then turn it on in here so you can see me.
Hello.
What up?
There you are. Hey,
there I am.
up, man?
What's good? Okay, hold on 1 second. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
How you doing? Are you missing Los Angeles?
I'm missing it desperately, Hasan. It's so cold here.
Wait, hold on. Why is the Discord not working? Okay, 1 second. Boom. Okay, there it is. Ladies and gentlemen, here she is, Alex Press, brilliant labor journalist, here to talk to us about, of course, TikTok general strikes and why they're important and why I'm bad to the working class for not highlighting the important issues and only talking about fake labor action like fucking the IATSE strikes or the John Deere workers, or talking to other blue check journalists like Jonah Furman and yourself, of course. Yeah, it's inverted chat. Shut the fuck up. Anyway, so Alex here wrote about the IATSE strikes, or leading up to the strike authorization here in sunny California, Los Angeles, for a little bit, and she did an awesome job. And since then, a lot has changed, and I'm here to hear from the rank and file, because as of Sunday night, the union leaders at IATSE, I think was Matt Loeb and others, finally came to a conclusion where they accepted the deal, I guess, of the Motion Picture Association. However, the rank and file has been very upset about this, as far as what we've seen. So, first of all, what's going on? I don't know why I'm being so formal. I have a friend over too. He'll be here in a second.
Okay, great. Yeah, we know each other, so we.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why I'm being super formal.
Yeah. So Saturday night is when they announced the tentative agreement. So I don't know how much you've talked about this before. I'm sure it sounds like a lot over the past couple of weeks or so, or at least the past week.
Yeah.
But just so people know, so how the process of bargaining a contract works is, you elect your leadership, your bargaining committee, to sit across from the boss every day, in this case, the studios, right? So places that are like traditional studios, like Warner Brothers, and also the new streaming services. So places like Netflix or Amazon, even Disney, Apple, they're all part of the organization that was bargaining with the union, IATSE. And so on Saturday night, they announced that they had reached a tentative agreement, which means they've finally come to the same, they've met their gap on issues and agreed to something. That could be the new 3-year contract, covers 60,000 people total, which is a lot of people for a contract. And what happens next is, it says tentative for a reason. So though a lot of media will sort of report this as, okay, story's over, they've got a contract.
Deadline.
Unions are... Exactly. Yeah. So even though that's how it'll be framed a lot of the times, really the tentative is important because unions are democratic, right? They're one of the few democratic institutions we have in this country. And while they're not perfect, one thing they do is that you get to vote on whether you like that contract. You elected your leaders, so that was already democratic, and now you get to vote on whether you're okay with what they've come to. So the membership now is waiting to get the full terms of that agreement. They got little highlights, right? Immediately upon that agreement being reached, but they're going to spend some time talking amongst each other, reading through the fine print, meeting with their local leaders, the people who lead their locals, and hearing what they think about the contract. Yeah. And then they're going to all vote. And so that process in IATSE takes kind of a while. And so it's not like tomorrow you're going to hear about the vote results. It might be a few weeks.
Yeah, and some of the highlights here, as you can see, are that, this is purposely vague, but living wage achieved, improved wages and working conditions for streaming. Also, this was a contested point from the rank and file as far as I've seen. Retroactive scale wage increases of 3% annually, which is literally, in comparison to the 5.4% increase in inflation, is you're fucked. You're not getting, it's not even a pay raise. employer-funded benefits for the term, increased meal period penalties, including the prevailing rate. Now, the meal period penalties up until this moment was $8. So when workers on background that work like as the key grip, the people that handle the electricity on stage, the people that handle the lighting on stage, when they had to work through lunch, there was a penalty that the company, the studio would have to pay. That penalty was laughable, however, $8. So they increased that meal period penalty. I don't know to what. Daily rest periods of 10 hours without exclusions. Now, that means that you're still working 14 fucking hours a day. That means 10 hours for you to drive to work, 10 hours for you to drive from work, go back home, put on some fucking, soggy ramen or whatever the fuck you have, shove it down your gullet as quickly as possible, and then pass out on your fucking couch or wherever the fuck you're staying, only to do it once again. And of course, the daily rest periods were 10 hours for some of the local unions, so that doesn't even capture, like, that's not even a positive change for some of the locals that already had the daily rest hours of 10 hours.
I would just add that actually, because there's no limit on how long a workday can be, only that you get 10 hours after one before you have to be back on set. This industry, there are so many stories, right, of people working 20-hour days. It's not like they can't work 20-hour days anymore. It just means that they're going to get 10 hours after. So, of course, if you were working 5 days a week the same amount, it would be 14 hours. That's just the math of what that would require. But there's nothing to say that someone can't work you on a Friday for 20 hours and then just make sure that you have a time extended after that. Yeah. So there's no limits on that, for sure.
And the weekend... Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
My understanding is that was never a conversation at the table, that there would be limits on the length of a workday, only the turnaround times and the weekend rest periods.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Weekend rest periods of 54 and 32 hours. They put MLK Jr. Birthday holiday. Wow, congratulations. That's cool. You get a day off. And diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Don't know what that means. Usually that's just like, some neoliberal seasoning on there. 13th and 14th checks for pre-August 2009 retirees, additional MPI hours for on-call employees, and expansion of sick leave benefit for the entire country. So, as far as I understand, and you or one of the people that brought this to my attention, is that the rank and file again is not united on this. Even like the IA Stories account had a little interesting moment there where they like shut off the comments after they said, "Oh, successfully, we've reached a deal. Like, how sick? We don't have to strike." And then everyone was like, "Well, wait a minute, fuck this. Like, the tentative agreements are fucking dog shit. I still want to strike." And now, if they want to, they can't. They can't even strike on Monday if they would like to, because they have to get the legalese, the legal contract, and have that be read to all the members. So they're still going back to. They've gone back to work as of today. And they're still going back to work right now all around the country until they vote to ratify the contract, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the thing, is that there's all this momentum and then this stops it, right? And this is what we saw with the John Deere workers, too. I know you had Jonah on the show. Like, he talked about, I'm sure, that there was an extension. So the strike was about to start, and then the union said, actually, we have an extension on negotiating. And for a lot of workers, they're like, look, we prepared. Like, we got ready. We talked to our families. We talked to each other. Psychologically, going on strike is a big thing, and it's very hard to walk it back once your membership expects a strike. Yeah. And so here, now there could be up to, a couple months before this is voted on. That's what happened in 2018. It actually took around 2 months for the vote to come in. Because the sort of explanation is that it takes a long time for the lawyers to type this up and get it all figured out. But for the people who are working in IATSE, in the lead up to during these negotiations after the strike authorization vote happened, they said that the producers, that their employers were working them harder and harder and longer to try to get as much done before a strike. And so now you just have a whole new period here where there's certainly people not happy with the contract, and yet they're now thinking, okay, even if we might eventually vote this down, we're now going to have a long period where our bosses are going to keep trying to work us because they see we might vote this down. And so it's totally true. And I mean, what you talked about with like so much outrage online from memberships, it's hard to say how widespread it is because we're talking about so many thousands of people. And obviously, as well as I do, that social media is not a reflection of how everyone feels in the world about things. And so it's hard.
Wait, you mean to tell me that the Shining Path is not the only true communist utopia, and that I'm a dirty revisionist who works for the CIA? That's what the internet tells me. So, yeah, I mean, CIA to CIA, we know how it works.
Yeah,
you work for Jacobin.
I can't believe you said I'm CIA when you tweeted about this happening.
Of course I did. I wanted to trigger everyone. The NCIA. All right, sorry. Let's keep going.
But yeah, I would just say that there's certainly a lot of people who are very angry. You know, there's questions, right? So the membership doesn't have the full language yet. So there's certain things that maybe are getting less attention publicly that people just have questions about. Like, for example, what is a living wage for the lowest paid members? That isn't spelled out, right? And there's a big issue about pensions. So the streamers don't have to pay residuals to the members, which, you know, these residuals come from like DVD sales, VHS sales, Blu-ray, which is all declining, right? So you see this deficit in the pension. So while the contract apparently says that, you know, that huge deficit, $400 million, is filled, it doesn't really say if there's new mechanisms for keeping this from becoming a problem again. But especially people's concerns are around the turnaround times. A large number of people said they wanted 12 hours, that nothing less than that will do. So again, like as you laid out, we're talking about long commutes. Sets are often in remote locations. LA has a ton of traffic, and that's where a lot of these people work. And so having 10
Georgia,
hours
Ohio, it's not even just Los Angeles though. Like,
yep.
You know, there's like, imagine living in fucking Georgia in the middle of the winter and you have to drive and you're falling asleep. It got to such a point that, like, I mean, at least amongst like the IATSE people that I've talked to and what I've read so far, there's like people know at least one person on set, and on every set there's one guy that knows someone who fucking unfortunately died in or got in a serious car accident because they're falling asleep on the wheel. It's like this is a threat not only to the workers themselves but other people as well, and it's happening because they're being fucking worked to the goddamn nub, like worked to the bone every fucking day.
mean, it's crazy because, like, I would say the company I write most about is Amazon, and obviously everyone knows that warehouse work at Amazon is really bad, like famously bad, and yet I was completely shocked the first time I wrote about this, well before it was clear that this was really going to come to a head in this way with this kind of militancy. I wrote about this in early August, and I published the article, and within a couple hours, dozens of members of IATSE had gotten in touch with me saying that they had gotten in car crashes on the way home. And I'm just one person, right? And these are just people who reached out to me. And so this is a pervasive problem. And also the meal penalties are part of that, right? Like if you're being worked through lunch, if you don't get to sit down at all, or you don't get to eat enough, it's crazy that that's legal, right? So while the increased penalties might be better, there's nothing to say that a company like Amazon that might be running your set does not prefer to just spend what to it is pennies to make sure that it gets...
Amazon, which famously, instead of improving the workplace conditions and like literally putting fucking like, some sort of climate control within their factories, would just put an ambulance outside of their fucking factory, which was called 600 times, if I'm not mistaken, over the course of one fucking work year. Okay. Like this is all in the interest of improving profit margins. And yes, if you are going to be worked to the fucking core and you're going to die because of heat exhaustion or whatever in a distribution facility, that's fine, because ultimately, you know, we'll pay that off. We'll pay the family some hush money. There's like very little benefits there, and there's plenty of people who are desperate for work regardless, especially when it's like $15 an hour, when like not comparable unionized industry jobs, but like other jobs or lack thereof in that similar in that area, in that region, are paying $7 an hour. They're like, yeah, fuck it, I'll put myself through these horrifying conditions. Same with the strike.
Imagine dying in a car crash because you were working on like BoJack Horseman or something. You know, you're working on The Plot Against America and you died. Like these shows, who cares? It's crazy that this is justified often on the basis of you're lucky to work in showbiz. You know, this is a glamorous industry, but there's nothing very glamorous about doing craft services on a set or handling a camera. And people should not be asked to give up having children, having a family, getting home safe, eating. I mean, it's crazy that this is acceptable in the first place, and it's for movies. It's not for healthcare, right? These are not doctors. These are camera operators.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any questions, by the way? Are you listening?
Yeah, I'm learning the whole thing. Yeah, I'm sponging. I'm sponging.
So xQc, Felix Lengyel, is a friend of mine. He's number 2 on the Twitch leaks. on the platform. He used to act. I just found out literally like before you came on that he's forklift certified. He used to work for a AB InBev factory in Canada, huh?
Yeah. How do you know that? That's their name, AB InBev.
Of course. I mean, it's a very famous company that I talk about. But yeah, he's forklift certified and he's a Genie Lift certified.
Yep, that's true.
And now
So
he plays video games and farts and slams the fart on stream.
That's how I
So
do
you
it.
could have him help with like construction at the house.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So when we did construction jobs, I would just do painting. I do the more delicate stuff. None of the heavy lifting. My muscles don't allow it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can make Hasan keep doing that.
Yeah, he'll do that.
Yeah. Alex knows. She wrote. She wrote the New York Times article from the HasanAbi headquarters.
Yeah, you can't tell people that, but I guess now it's too late.
Oh no, I've been telling people that. I don't care. Why are you worried they're gonna cancel you? They're gonna be like, oh fucking sucks.
I'm not worried.
She's betrayed the working class by hanging out with the socialist streamer who's fake and bad.
Actually, surprisingly,
true,
the people that work at the beer factory, they were unionized. They were making a lot of money. Workers were making stacks, right? And you should see the in January or whatever, they would get like their yearly bonus, right? And like a couple days after January, New Year kicked in, you'd see the parking lot was full of brand new cars, luxury cars. It's crazy. The bonuses were massive. Sometimes, it's just crazy.
I mean, they deserve it though, right? Because like they're obviously making a lot of money. There's no value without labor. Without the workers, there would be no the factory would not be in operation, which is at the heart of what these strikes are about.
Right.
Something that Americans
it's
forget.
I think it's interesting comparing it to the writers' strike that happened not that long ago, in that like the shows kind of can go on when just one type of worker is on strike. In a way that is not true for IATSE workers. Like if the crew members on set, if the people who operate the cameras, who do the hair and makeup, who deal with communications and feeding everyone else on set are gone, that whole set is shut down. And so there was a lot of pressure for the strike not to happen. Because the industry, the content churn of the pandemic, everyone is at home watching Netflix. And so these companies, especially the streamers, have more demand than ever. And the workers were out of work for a few months during the pandemic. So they need the paycheck too. And so there was always a lot of pressure.
You have a question?
I have a question. You keep saying the streamers. What is that, a streamer?
Yeah,
Not
so
us.
it's not Hasan.
No, I know that.
So that's the term for the streaming services. So
Netflix.
like Apple, so Disney Plus, Netflix, Amazon Video, all of those services compared to like the old studios, right? So like the traditional Warner Brothers, for example, is not a streamer. But these are all the
technically now they are because they bought. I think they're collaborating with HBO, right, or something.
Right, yeah. I mean, this is the other thing, is that there's all this consolidation going on, so these distinctions actually are making less sense than ever. And it's important because there was an agreement made in 2009 with IATSE and so-called new media properties, which again are the streamers, that because this was an experiment at the time, right? Like it wasn't established that Netflix was going to be so powerful or that everyone was going to watch stuff online.
I mean, they were still sending DVDs. They were still fucking mailing DVDs when this agreement was struck. So, just for people to understand.
Another question. I feel like people are like, they're like people that had their shows on Netflix or whatever. Everybody's like reeling back, making their own like streaming services or whatever. And now everybody's like being separate. And now it feels like if you want to watch stuff and you like watching stuff, you have to subscribe to like 8 services and remember all your passwords. It's like this crazy thing. I don't know.
Yeah, but the trick is that even though it seems like there's more diversity in streamers, it actually is just because the industry as a whole is moving towards streamers instead of like having these big budget studios have like rely on DVD distribution and rely on fucking cinema and whatnot. So what is actually happening behind the scenes is that like big studios are being bought out by the streamers themselves.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Or big studios are buying the streamers themselves. So like that's basically even though it feels like there's a lot of more diversity in streaming platforms, there technically isn't. There's still consolidation occurring.
Right. Yeah. And so, like you said, so these companies are now behemoths, right? They're buying up the traditional studios. In fact, that's how powerful they are. And it's because so many people, I mean, they were already heading that way, and then the pandemic only accelerated that move. And meanwhile, again, they're not paying into people's pensions. They also are making people work more because, again, they're putting out more content. And so workers have said to me, like it used to be understood that these jobs would be intensive and we would have long work weeks. And then we would be unemployed for a while in between projects. They're like, now there's just so much demand. We're being shuttled from project to project. And so now my whole life is just work. And that agreement in 2009 said that things like there's not going to be residuals. You're going to have worse working conditions basically on these shows. And the quote, the sort of language in the contract was like, the workers need to have greater flexibility. These are uncertain companies. We don't know what the profits are going to be like. And it also said that if and when things stabilize, both parties will recognize that and basically will stop having these worse conditions. And so the workers in IATSE are like, hasn't that happened? This is obviously true now that they're actually dominating the industry. Why are we still having a worse contract with them? You had a question.
Question, yeah. Regardless of like the profits or whatever these things, separate from that, whenever the streamers or people that are super big buy out some studios and buy out some things, is there like an observable or predictable a decline in product quality, like in the thing that people actually have and watch later on? Do you think there's a drop in quality?
I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a matter of taste to some degree. But it's certainly the case.
Qualitative is hard to quantify.
Okay, let me give you an example. I don't want to be too. I want to make this more an example that's like easy for us to understand. Let's say a streamer that gets bought out from going to Twitch or someone else, right? The product always suffers. Like when they do swap, the product becomes not as good. Whenever a big streamer buys out a studio, does the product become affected by that? Or
I personally think so. And the greatest example of that consolidation is Electronic Arts buying every other fucking gaming studio and basically pumping out the same old bullshit year over year over year, rather than having AAA titles that require 5-year runways and all that sort of stuff, because the real money makers are things like fucking 2K. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is, you absolutely experience that as a consequence of these consolidations as well in the Hollywood side of things, in an exact same in an identical capacity. Think about what happened to fucking BioWare. Like all the games that we used to love when we were growing up, I mean, they don't fucking make games like that anymore for the most part. I mean, why do we have Grand Theft Auto 5 playing on like the 11th fucking platform that it's been on, rather than Grand Theft Auto 6? It's because Rockstar, which otherwise used to be an incredible fucking publisher, incredible developer, is now banking on the IP that they had created. That's why. Did you watch Space Jam, the second one?
No.
Yeah, it was dog shit. It was basically, it was basically a beloved, cherished fucking IP that we grew up with, that they relied on. They relied on the nostalgia component, and they 100% just kind of wanted to flex all the properties that they own. Same with that fucking streaming movie that came out, like Ryan with Vance City Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds.
Sweet Home.
Or what?
Did you not see that?
No, I did not see that. But it's just like, so there is definitely like a drop in the quality. Home Alone, is that what you mean? No. Free Guy was what I was thinking of, like where they're just like flexing all the media properties that they fucking own.
Yeah.
And it's just not even about like. It's not even about like good quality content, but instead more so about like all the IP, all the intellectual property that they own. Like, that's Star Wars Pog.
And part of it is also that then they're consolidating, right? And they control, there's a relationship to distribution in that smaller distributors that might distribute more independent movies are getting totally priced out of the entire economy. And so the sort of cool or interesting or good movies you might find otherwise, now you don't even know where to find them, right? Because all you can find are these major platforms and the Frankenstein productions they create, like that Space Jam movie. Yeah,
it's all just like, the content itself even becomes like referencing things that you recognize, and it sucks. It just sucks. That is perfectly captured in that fucking Free Guy snap that went viral that I have made fun of regularly on this broadcast. Only rare studio like A24. I mean, they make indie shit for the most part, so that's why it's different and the quality is better. But even they will probably cave, and when the profit motive kicks in, start making dog shit content. It just always happens. And meanwhile, the side that we're talking about, of course, other than how it impacts the consumer, is how it impacts the workers, the people that are actually behind the scenes making the content. And yes, while celebrities who are cherished figures, who are very visible, who are also unionized, get a larger piece of the profits that they generate for the movie, even then, their surplus labor value is still being extracted, obviously, because studios are making billions of dollars, and then these guys are making like 20 million, and you're like, well, what the fuck? This guy's making 20 million when who knows how much he's generating for the movie itself by just acting in it. They get a decent chunk of the pie, but the people working behind the scenes, the people that make the entire thing run, they're not. And that's the point here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I've talked to people, like, I remember talking to a TV makeup artist, and she was like, the actors are unionized. We're not opposed to them. There's no sort of conflict between us. But she's like, it's crazy that we're the ones who show up on set earlier than them, who stay after to wrap and clean up and set everything, break things down, set it up in the morning. And yet we're paid so much less. And she's like, sometimes I'll be doing an actress's makeup, and she has her kid in her lap. They're allowed to bring their kids to work. And she said to me, I would never be able to do that. That's obviously prohibited for us. And she's like, the class system that it feels like this sort of the incredibly hierarchical system on sets is just completely in your face all the time, right? And so IATSE with this strike threat is saying, you know what? If you won't treat us well, if you're going to actually kill us with these working conditions, then there just won't be a film industry for the moment.
Yeah.
And the threat was credible, which is why the producers have moved a little bit. The question is the details of how much they actually moved and whether the workers themselves, who are very ready and willing to act together, think it's good enough.
One thing that I've recognized, and you and I talked about this briefly, one thing that I suspect is that Loeb and like the union bosses, I believe, were victims to their own like fears about how little power they have, looking at like, how these union negotiations have worked in the past. And that was why they did not go balls to the wall or make like demands that would have been universally approved by the rank and file. I do feel like they didn't even realize how much momentum their negotiations would potentially have. And I feel like that has that's changing. That's part of the reason why I hope that they actually go back and they don't ratify the contract and they actually do end up striking, because the iron is really hot. There's actually a tight labor market for once, or at least according to the fucking Chamber of Commerce. They're constantly fucking crying about it. You know what I mean? So they don't need to settle for crumbs. They can actually demand more. And I hope they end up realizing that. I hope the members of IATSE end up realizing that and don't cuck themselves to this deal, which will be for 3 years, but still, that's...
Okay, I have to correct you on one thing, Hasan. Going forward, you can't say union boss. These are elected leaders, right? I mean, truly that is a line out of right-wing media. Don't do it. Even liberal media doesn't say union boss as much these days, so you're to the right of the New York Times on that one.
Okay, I'm sorry that I don't have a fucking style guide. Sometimes I say union bosses, okay? Labor union leadership.
Right.
Sorry, you're right.
Yeah, we can be critical of them, but they are not the boss.
No, this is yet another neoliberal aesthetics-based conversation. Okay.
It's
fine.
Look, you're the media, Hasan. I gotta correct you on your errors. The Lion News Media on Twitch.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It is. See, that's how effective propaganda works, though, because it's so. Because that's how like this information is trafficked through the media cycle, that like I end up picking up reactionary propaganda points that imply that like there is no democratic organization within the union structure, and imply that there's a union boss. And it's like such a nefarious but like such a simple way to for me to even regurgitate right-wing propaganda, reactionary propaganda. You're right. You're absolutely correct.
Thank you. I'm glad I've won this argument. That's important.
Okay, dude.
I just want to say that, like, I agree with you. I think that's an important
I'm kicking you to the curb next time you come to Los Angeles.
Yeah, you can't get me out of that house if you try. I'm coming back. You seem like you wouldn't care.
No, I don't give a shit.
But yeah, I mean, I would just say that it's true that I think for a lot of the leadership, there was a sense that they didn't quite realize how much they could win right now. You know, and in part that's because these negotiations have been going on for months. So the membership wasn't as engaged when they started. And so the things they brought to the table as sort of the biggest version of their demands were not ambitious enough, at least according to a lot of members, right? So the fact that it's not 12-hour turnaround times, that in fact they were only asking from the start for 10 hours without exclusions, which is progress for some members of the union. But other members are saying, you know, that's not even nearly enough. We should have started that way. And this is how it often works, is a membership is sort of changed as far as their expectations by the process of negotiating or organizing together. And their expectations really get raised. And so that's what we saw with IATSE is, you know, you mentioned the IA Stories account. You know, there have been these through social media and other channels. The membership has sort of gotten outraged together. They've begun talking to each other and realized like, oh my God, this problem is way worse than I realized, or it's more pervasive than I realized, especially the hours problem. And so they now, by the course of this point in the negotiations, actually want more than they originally were asking for. And that makes it very complicated for the leadership. It's true, because it's hard to go back and say we want more than we even asked for in the first place. But it can happen if the membership rejects that contract and actually says we're striking unless we get bigger things.
Let's talk about that really quickly.
Well, a small question first.
What?
Small question.
Go ahead.
Let's say some company or some factory or whatever are doing really good and everybody's working well. They're producing a lot of product and the margins are crazy. They're making a lot of profit and a lot of surplus. Let's say they were to give workers more money or a better salary, right? When things go bad, can they take it away or reduce it because now it's failing, or do they have to stay there?
Well, I mean, there's no set answer to that, right? So what's useful about a union is that you have it in writing, right? So at least for the course of your contract, you have a standard. Obviously, if you're just a random worker and your boss gives you a raise, he can always take it away. A contract gives you, you know, as a collective unit, a union, more of a say. But that said, you know, he can take it away. It's not illegal. It's up to the workers to say whether or not they're going to let that happen, right? I mean, this is what's happening at John Deere, except that they're still making huge profits and they're trying to take away pensions from the workers. So, of course, it's illegal for a boss to take away benefits, but is it right? And are workers going to let it happen is the question of labor politics often at this point in time.
Yeah, the union exclusively, it's not a political organization. It's nothing. It's just basically a way for workers to get together to get together and say, hey, these are what we want out of this workplace. And if you don't want to give that to us when we ask individually as individuals, because they will never do that, because united you bargain, but divided you beg, when salaries are hidden and all this shit, right? The union basically just is a protective measure for you to be able to say, like, hey, listen, like, I'm not just some fucking Joe Schmo by myself here, desperate because I have to put food on the table, desperate because I have to, you know, get this remuneration, get this payment so that I can put a fucking shelter over my head and, you know, feed my fucking children. But together, you're now the desperate one, because if we stop working, you're fucked. You have no more money. You have no more profits. You're fucked. And we can hold out together. And unions also have strike funds for that particular purpose as well, so they can, you know, live out through the work stoppage. And also they offer benefits too.
I would just add there that sort of sadly, the story of a lot of workers' incomes over the past few decades in the United States is that they are losing things. And sometimes unions agree to that, right? If an employer says at the bargaining table, our profits are down drastically, more often than not, the union agrees to temporarily take worse working conditions. And in fact, there's actually a strike going on right now where workers said, you know, they had previously agreed to sort of a temporary worse tier of employment because the company said we're in dire straits. And the workers said, okay, fine, we can have this temporary period, but when profits are up again and when things are better, when the next contract is being negotiated, we are going to want to get rid of that. And it turns out what's happening now is the company has come to the bargaining table and said, actually, we want to make it permanent. And so that's where the disagreement comes in, is that there is often sort of lying going on about what the profits are. I mean, these companies so often that are asking for workers to accept less their executives are getting paid millions of dollars, right? At John Deere, their
They're getting
CEO
paid
got
millions of
100
dollars so that because they are capable of fucking squashing union momentum too.
That's true.
Yeah,
Yes.
they literally are getting paid that because they're like, I know the best lawyers that can fuck this shit up if they ever want to do any sort of like collective action.
That's interesting. I have a really small parallel story. It's actually a good story. So when I got into the Overwatch League, right? You know what the Overwatch League is? Right?
Yeah.
So we all signed our own contracts with our own company. And then we went to the opening media day, right, with the Overwatch League. And then they give us these big ass contracts at the end of the conference, right, where every player had to sign to really like accept the official like Overwatch League agreements or whatever, right? And then there's a document was huge, big ass pile document, and not everybody agreed with everything that was a document. We're like, this is kind of stupid. And then people started bringing up in the room like, guys, maybe we should like unionize or talk about this, right? And then we're like, oh yeah, maybe we should like unionize, right? And then they were like, oh, you know what? You have a 24 hours to sign. You have to sign now. And everybody just signed it, right? And that was the end of it. And they've been talking about unionizing for years, and it never happened.
Yep, that's how it works. Companies will do everything and anything in their power. Doesn't matter if it's inhumane. Doesn't matter if it's illegal. They will do literally virtually anything they can to stop workers from unionizing. Even the threat of unionizing in many circumstances will get a company to be like, whoa, hold on. We'll give you more benefits. What do you want? Come on, we're a family. And they lie about a bunch of shit too. And that propaganda, unfortunately, accelerated through mainstream media as well, and that has existed in every facet of our fucking lives, is so pervasive that people themselves, like workers themselves, are anti-union for the most part. They're like, unions are mobbed up, unions are corrupt, and it's like, yeah, sure, there was mob influence in the past, and yes, there was still, there are still problems within unions, but ultimately a union is only there to benefit you and nothing else.
I would just say, though, that actually, I mean, so on several levels, it's not true, actually, that most workers are anti-union. So, of course, there's, like, polling that shows now highest number of people in the United States support unions. The problem is they can't get them because it's so hard to create a union in the United States. But also, I briefly was a union organizer, and the sort of ethos or standard template was that there will be 10% of people at your workplace who are diehard pro-union, who want to get involved immediately in helping organize. And there's going to be 10% who are hardline opposed. And those people, the people who are the activists, that 10%, you don't want to really focus on them. You've already won them. They're in. And that 10% who are opposed, you just want to isolate them. And it's everybody else in the middle. It's, it's the majority of the workers who actually might say something either pro or anti-union, but they really don't have strong opinions. And that's who you have to focus on. So I would just say that, as with so many other subjects, people don't have super strong opinions about this, and the fact is that, like, if you're their coworker, they'll listen to you. They'll take it seriously when you talk to them about these issues. So I certainly wouldn't say that most workers are, like, rabidly anti-union by any measure. They just kind of haven't had any experience with it at all.
Yeah, but because they don't have any experience with it, and because of, like, propaganda, they are very susceptible to be threatened by the corporation that oftentimes, and I keep going back to this over and over again, like in the case of Bessemer, Alabama, the company can fucking, get them to vote a certain way and destroy unionization efforts and get workers to vote against their best interests in that circumstance. But
right, I mean, because...
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say that, like, part of that, I mean, this was so true in that Bessemer campaign at the Amazon warehouse, is like so many workers now, especially young people in the United States, have so little evidence in their own lives that, like, working class people coming together can actually win anything, that you can win anything over your employer, but especially Amazon. There's so little evidence of it, right? Not only have you never been in a union, but also there's so few social welfare programs in this country. Like, we don't have universal health care. There's no sense of collective kind of commitment to one another and how, like, people in general can collaborate and make their lives better. And that is part of what helps bosses, right? When Amazon says this union's only going to hurt you, it's very hard when people say, I have no evidence that that's not true, and I've never seen me and my fellow tenants come together against the landlord. It's not just about unions. It's about the sense of powerlessness. But that's what organizing is actually changing people's minds, right? And that happens slowly. It can happen far before a formal union campaign. Like what you talked about with people having issues with that contract. A union is just what we call workers coming together. So it's like, it wouldn't mean you have to formally unionize for all of you to have said, you know what, we're all going to say no and refuse to sign this. That would be collective action, right? That would be organization over a workplace issue. You'd be legally protected, and it's not a formal union campaign. So union really, instead of this sort of third-party idea of it, it's really exists at so many levels when it's workers sort of starting to come together and get those wins.
It's rugged individualism. American exceptionalism and rugged individualism has absolutely eviscerated the understanding of the power that the American working class has, unfortunately, where they think that like every instance of collective action, which is oftentimes done in an effort to bring about more individual freedoms. Like that's why you engage in collective action. That's why you are fighting in your workplace for better benefits, so that you can have a more fulfilling fucking life, so you don't have to have a 10-hour turnaround, like that you can go back and have 2 additional hours to be able to do shit for yourself, maybe read a goddamn book or whatever. And that's individual liberty that you can get, but the shitty side of it is that they've sold this like false notion of rugged individualism that you have to cuck yourself to your boss regularly, and that's how you're a good American.
Right. I mean, it's very funny in that part of what we always say in the labor movement is like, we start at self-interest. That is how you're going to win a union at your workplace or get people to do something like sit in a union meeting during their off-the-clock hours, is that you have to, they have to believe that it's worth it, that they might get something better in their own lives. And then it goes from there, right? Your actual views start changing when you see the power that you and your coworkers have. But it starts with self-interest, and it continues being self-interest. I mean, these workers at IATSE want better lives. And part of this is like, they got to experience it when they were out of work from the industry during the early months of COVID. They realized like, oh, right, I have hobbies, or I want to get married, and how am I going to meet someone and fall in love when I'm spending all of my time at work or commuting? I mean, these are basic things that make up a good life, and they're not being able to do it because of their bosses.
Yeah, I will never find love, so that's outside of my scope of interest or understanding.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up.
But listen, I have a just curious question in here. Won't companies end up outsourcing jobs to Taiwan/India for much easier and cheaper costs without having to deal with unions? Just curious.
A lot of companies.
Fucking owned, Alex. That's right. You're fucking owned.
A lot of companies want to outsource labor. It's a question of whether we let that happen or not.
Great,
I don't know
great answer. And that is something that the government can and should control. And because they didn't, look at the way that the fucking Rust Belt exists currently. Congratulations. We allowed the profit-seeking, vulturous capital owners to decide that it is actually much cheaper to go and manufacture products overseas and then ship it back here. And give so much power, even if you want to think about it from a national security point of view, so much power to China, our greatest, mortal enemy on the planet, China.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I would just say is that, so recently there was a strike at Nabisco across the country. All these workers at Nabisco, a bunch of them were working 80-hour weeks, doing serious labor, and it was forced, right? So they were getting paid a lot because of all that overtime, but they didn't have a say. They actually were just being forced to work 16 hours, which a lot of people were like, I don't care how much money you're paying me. I should have the right to say no to that, and we need to change it. And part of what Nabisco was doing was saying, in the past, they had moved jobs to Mexico, and there was sort of this implicit threat of that again this time. And what the workers said wasn't like anti-Mexican sentiment or something. They just started, some of them at least, started building ties with the workers in the Nabisco plant in Mexico and said, how do we get you better working conditions? Because if we don't, this is going to keep happening. And so this is part of what the internationalism of socialists is about. Is that that you can't build socialism in one country. That
I don't know. It sounds like some Trotskyist bullshit to me. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what she's saying. This is the op. This is the ops talking, chat. Okay. No, I of course I fully agree with you, and that's why it's the international workers of the world and not workers in just America. Okay, right. So. And there is that is important as an important thing to consider as well. So I don't know if you have any other questions, but the last thing I wanted to ask you before we let you go, and thank you so much for coming on once again, is we talked about the ratification process. Now, there is, of course, also some interesting things going on there. I believe that it's similar to an electoral college system with respect to the locals within IATSE, and that there needs to just be a simple majority vote in a lot of the locals. So, like, if some of the largest locals, regardless, if some of the largest locals are voting in favor of this, it kind of doesn't matter, or against ratifying this deal, it kind of doesn't matter, right?
So yeah, it's really complicated. I would just say again, yeah, so everybody votes, but then yes, this electoral college system means, just like how it does in the United States in general, that the end result can be very different than the popular vote. And so what's good is that the biggest locals under this contract, which are locals 600 and 700, are the ones that have in the past either criticized previous tentative agreements, or local 700 voted against the last contract. And so they are sort of the ones that I would say are more likely to sort of oppose it as a local in general. And they're the biggest ones, right? So they would still need a couple others on their side, but it's not impossible. That said, the flip side is, like, if those locals vote yes, it's going to be very hard for everyone else to outnumber them, right? And so the math here is really boring and complicated, but it is important to keep it in mind, because that calculation is going to be happening. And it does make for the possibility that, like, this passes by what seems like a strong margin based on their voting system, but then when you look at the raw numbers, it might be a very close split. And then you're going to see all of this extreme dissatisfaction and anger among the membership, who are going to feel like they got gypped. And so I would just say that it is totally possible for them to organize and get this voted down, but they have so little existing organization, and also so far none of the local leaders have said whether they are going to recommend their members vote in favor of the contract. So it depends on what everyone is going to say about the details of this. But I would just say it can be done. And I think, just to sort of bring it back to the current strike that's going on, this is what the UAW workers did at John Deere, is they didn't have leadership on their side. They didn't have strong organization. And they independently, all of these different locals, rejected that contract. And I think IATSE workers are looking at that and they're saying, okay, if they can do it, we can try it too. And it's certainly the case that it's not just a few people who are unhappy with this contract. It's definitely a lot. So I would say, again, don't assume that this is done.
All right, perfect. Okay, one last question if you have one. If you don't, it's fine.
No. I had a question about the past, but that was more informative. I think it's some of the things that you guys were talking about are too specific and to the point. I know there's many questions I have about that.
Uh-huh. Okay, you can ask other questions about unionization if you want as well, because xQc commands the attention of probably a million 12 to 14-year-olds. So all these juice lords, 12 to 18-year-olds, all these juice lords are in here learning about unionization and why it's important. And that's a good thing overall, because otherwise they're going to be hearing it from their dad who watches fucking Fox News and thinks like unions are communism or whatever, and that communism is bad. So, that's why.
Well, I try to only talk about politics or important stuff when I know about it or I'm educated about it, so I ask questions when I can. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to have a take, because I feel like even though I could be doing good to the ears of people, I could be doing harm, and I think that's too much responsibility for me. I'd rather just not say anything about it until I'm educated about it,
Yeah.
I think that's a good perspective to have, rather than to just say stuff you don't know about. I mean, the basic thing about unions is that that's what we call it when workers start pushing back on the dictatorship of work, right? When you enter a workplace in the United States, you give up so many of your rights at the door. The boss has effectively unlimited claim over your time. He can tell you what you and your coworkers can't talk about at work. He controls all these things around speech and all of that. And
what
so
unionization
is about actual democracy in our lives at the places most of us spend most of our waking hours at this point, which is work. So in that sense, it's a kind of basic sense of democracy and a sense of control over your own life, right? Because I think the tragedy is that, for me at least, what motivates my politics is I think every person has the right to a good life. And I think there are certain things in the world, certain forces and relationships that prevent that from happening. And the ability of an employer to have absolute say over what a worker does and doesn't do when they're on the job is a crime. And it ends up being horrible in so many ways. It makes people's lives so miserable. And so unionization often is not the super oppositional thing. It doesn't have to mean your boss is bad. It's really just about saying, okay, we have the right to have a say in what my day is going to look like. I have the right to sit at a table across from you and tell you what I need. and also tell you things like what's going wrong in this shop or at this restaurant that you might not know about, and you need to listen to us, and we're the ones who do the work, and we know how to do it best, and so it can be good for everyone in that sense. But it's really about having a sense of control, because if you feel like you don't have control over your life, that can lead you to very bad places in so many ways.
Remember when you and I talked about unionization, and you said that you worked as a janitor, right? And I was like, and you talked about how you wanted to like maximize your efficiency or whatever when you were cleaning.
Yeah.
And I asked you, like, well, your bosses don't know fucking shit about cleaning toilets like you do. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, like, obviously, your perspective in that situation would absolutely be beneficial to the company overall. But given the current organizational structure of a corporation, which is inherently authoritarian, and we completely understand it to be that way, and we literally expect it to be that way, that hierarchy, where your boss is like a fucking supreme overlord, a dictator, your boss will never hear from you if you actually say, like, well, this would be better or more beneficial. He can fucking fire you if he wants to. He tell you to shut the fuck up unless you're unionized, in which case you have some kind of protection at the very least.
Yeah, but they always hold most of the power, right? So it feels like you don't want to like bite the hand that feeds or whatever, and you're scared of like if you say something about it, then you'll lose your job or something, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's the key, is that they can fire you if you do that fight individually. But what if all of your coworkers said, here's the problem? And I mean, the sort of thing I always say is they can't fire all of you. And that is what the power of collective organizing is that you can all come together and say, here's the problem and it needs to be addressed. And it is way less risky. It is way less scary than trying to do it on your own. And also you're more likely to be heard and for you to win that fight. Because again, the boss is just he doesn't care what you have to say. But what if everybody said it to him? That's a very different dynamic.
Yeah, unions simply allow you a seat at the table, a representative that represents your interest for once to have a seat at the table, because there is the never-ending threat of work stoppages in the back of the minds of the bosses. So that's why it's ultimately a good thing. That's why I always say, like, unions aren't like good, bad, whatever, left, right. It doesn't matter. They're just fair, okay? They are the starting point towards fairness. It's like the first, like, most significant yet like still lowest on the rung of like equality thing you can do. It's just fair. It's fair to hear from the workers, and it will ultimately make the workplace a better place. However, that comes at the cost of the profit margin, and that is at the heart of why people are against unions, or rather bosses and those who have a stake in the stock market are against unions.
As long as it's still reasonable, right? Let's not go rant about this too long, but what if the demands of the union are objectively unreasonable? What then?
I can tell you that is an almost never the case situation, especially in the United States over the past couple decades. Usually the demands are far too low because everyone's expectations have been whittled down to almost nothing. So there are very few cases of that happening. And again, it's because these are people's jobs, right? So you are not going to demand things that you can't win. Because that would be a waste of everyone's time in the first place. It's very demoralizing to sit through months of negotiations or however many meetings for something that you know you're never going to get. So that is very unusual. And again, the way that capitalism works is that there are profits being made. And right now they're all going to the boss for the most part, right? He's going to try to keep those wages down. So I can just tell you that is almost never the case, that a worker is asking for more. Usually they're asking for things like, whether it's a slight raise or it's the fact that maybe a guy who has abused some other worker, that a boss who's abusing workers in the kitchen, that there's some sort of way to rectify that situation. Or it's how to clean better as a janitor. You're saying these products are giving us headaches. I think they're toxic. We demand better products so that we're not risking our health with these chemicals. Things like that. I mean, they're usually actually incredibly boring, which is why it's funny that the rhetoric is always so hyped up when people are anti-union, because usually we're talking about the most boring, basic things about doing your job.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Alex, thank you so much for coming on. This was a wonderful experience, as always. You're brilliant. I'm glad that, the New York Times recognizes that and let you write a little something on there about, right in the middle of a sea of of rhetoric from the likes of that dude who is now leaving the New York Times to fucking run for office, who used to like unironically advocate for sweatshops. What the fuck's his name? You know what I'm talking about?
Nicholas Kristof, right?
Yeah. This dude literally wrote like 8 articles straight up with the title like sweatshops are fucking sick, and not like it's sickening, like sweatshops are dope. I love sweatshops. Like
sweatshops rock. It was like double the sweatshops, double it's fun. I mean, you can imagine his editor was like, I'm running out of ways to describe this headline.
He's like, what's missing from the third world is more sweatshops.
Why, did he get canceled?
No. People that write stuff like that never get canceled, okay? They are impossible to cancel. It's because they are writing at the behest of those who pretty much, or they're united on the interests of those who fucking control everything. So why the fuck would they get canceled for it?
Yeah, he's just choosing to run for office because, I mean, I imagine that if you have a New York Times column, your ego must become enormous. And so apparently he believes that now the public
is that how that works
as well.
Is that has your ego become enormous?
Yeah, my life has totally changed. I published one time in the New York Times. Now I'm walking around my shitty apartment like I'm a genius. Everyone needs my takes.
Yeah, I see that.
I will say, though, it is funny. My dad actually asked me the day after it came out, he's like, so has your life changed? And I was like, does it look like it changed? I haven't even gotten paid for that yet. So literally nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Has changed.
A whole like fucking, what, like $100, $200? Sick.
Yeah.
It's a fucking real game changer, Dad.
I will say, I'll recommend people read the stuff I write in Jacobin. I just published an article today, like an hour ago, that is the update on what's going on with IATSE, and there's quotes from workers in there.
Is it the U.S. workers are in a militant mood?
No, this is film and TV workers. Oh my God, let's see. Film and TV workers have a tentative deal. Will IATSE's rank and file accept it? It was published like an hour ago. I was just doing something else, so I haven't like posted about it or anything. But it's a little longer than usual articles that I write because this is kind of complicated and there's a lot going on, and I want to give workers the room to say how they feel. So I would also encourage people to read that because it's probably the latest kind of news on the story.
Hell yeah. Well, once again, they're spamming your links, but where can people find your brilliant writing? Other than the New York Times, of course.
Yeah, if you just go to the front page of the New York Times every day. So again, if you search my name at Jacobin, it shows up all of my kind of archived every article I've written. And also, since I freelance occasionally, such as at such humble places as the New York Times, you should just follow me on Twitter. So that's where I post those articles. So that's at AlexNPress. Also, we didn't talk about it because I don't really talk about it that much, given IATSE is more important. But I host a podcast called Primer that's about Amazon and especially Amazon labor issues. So you can find that as well. What?
Yeah, we are Amazon workers ourselves.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, you're an important worker for Amazon.
Yeah.
Do you get grilled about that a lot? You must.
Twitch is like Twitch has like decent amount of autonomy from Amazon. I think like Jeff Bezos doesn't even know that like Twitch exists, you know what I mean, for the most part. If you remember, like, because they were talking about it in Congress and he was like, what, the Twitch
what is a Twitch?
Yeah.
Wait, really? So
he didn't say that, but he was just like, Twitch is one of our many properties, like I don't know what like everything is going on.
You don't think he watches you? Because I have to tell you, Hasan, like Bezos is sort of famously involved in ways that he shouldn't be at this point.
Please don't say
like,
that.
He's really
that
obsessive.
Scares the fucking shit out of me. Linus Tech Tips, who's a brilliant YouTuber who makes like, computers and stuff, recently made me a computer, and the side of it has literally Jeff Bezos, whose upper body is on a platter. So that they grafted that to the side of my PC. They made a leftist PC for me, so I'm legitimate. I mean, he's not the CEO anymore, but like still, I mean, he is.
He'd probably find that funny though. He'd probably laugh if I give him a good chuckle. No way he cares that much that he's like, I need to fire this. Who is this Hasan guy? Fire this guy, Twitch guys.
No, he won't. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he would care. I mean, this is what's so annoying about him is he's just happy because Hasan's making him some profit.
I'm making him a fuckload of money. He doesn't give a shit. I'm making him money while I'm like talking shit about his workplace conditions and whatnot.
Sounds like Donos.
I mean, yeah, pretty much. Jeff Bezos is the ultimate Twitch streamer. Yeah. Like he's getting hate donos nonstop.
Literally, we're all hate donoing.
Yeah. that is what happens when you are literally as powerful as a fucking demigod, pretty much.
I mean, that's the thing is you're just a different market for him, right? They're trying to offer all the different types of brands, and so that just brings new audiences to the platform.
Well, I mean,
so Bezos probably is subscribing.
You know the saying, they'll sell us the rope that from which they hang. It's just
exactly.
I must say, I don't know how much you know about Twitch though, but I must say that the Twitch Primes have been a crazy, very much needed thing to the Twitch infrastructure for years. It's helped a crazy amount. The sub counts back in the days used to be like, if you had 10K subs, you were like a lord. You were like a crazy. And now you see 50Ks on a lot of people's streams. And it also helps smaller streamers.
Including this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Twitch Prime is pretty good. It's also a really effective method of avoiding the ad at the top of the hour. Here, I'll tell you this, at least. I used to say that you can avoid the ads if you no longer want to see the ads, because I had a contract with Amazon where I have to run ads. And I negotiated it despite my agent's best efforts to like make sure we get the maximum amount of money. I was like, no, I'm going to negotiate it down to 60 seconds, an hour in the ad density, because I know they're going to want to fill that inventory, right? No matter what happens. Mm-hmm. They're going to fill it whether I want to do it or not. They'll fucking force ads onto the channel regardless, because they control it. And I negotiated it down so I had a 60-second ad density, right? For every hour, which is pretty reasonable. I fucking hated doing it. I'd run 0 ads before then. And I used to always say, you know, when I run it manually, I used to always say you can avoid those ads by subscribing for $5 or for free with an Amazon Prime, or by using an ad block or a VPN. And apparently they were not too fond of that. The ad block and VPN side.
Did they make you stop saying that?
I no longer say that. I don't even know what that is. What is an ad block?
Yeah, what is that?
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, I was now on topic. I just want to clarify. I'm pretty sure at your ad density, you're literally effectively just you're repositioning your pre-rolls and your mid-rolls. You're not. Your ads aren't even doing that much. At 1 minute, I don't know what the density is.
I think it's like 3, right? I think it's 3. It's like, so I didn't realize that like they already fucking forcibly run pre-rolls when you click onto the stream. And if you don't reach a certain level of density, see, like that was a contractual thing that I was unaware of, right? Where I didn't know that like, you know, people still see pre-rolls when they click onto the stream if they're not subscribed, if I don't hit that 3-minute density. So I cucked myself technically. Like that's something that they do regardless. And that's like somewhat understandable though, because it's like fuckload of inventory that's like, you know, they have a lot of advertisers that want to fucking spend money on the platform. But if some of the top streamers are not running ads because they don't give a shit, because they don't want to run ads, because they're making enough money as is, too much money, then, you know, they're not going to run ads. And that's why we weren't doing that. So they were like, okay, we have to literally fucking, you know, run these ads regardless.
Interesting.
Anyway.
Wow. Okay. This is turning into like...
Sorry.
This is turning into like me, like what I normally do, which is interview Amazon workers. But now I'm finally getting at one of the weirdest categories of Amazon workers, which is you. So now I'm finding out about the working conditions here. That's great.
But come on, it's like not even comparable. Let's be fucking real. Like,
I'm joking, but
I want to make. I don't want anyone to ever even, because like I have a lot of fucking people who despise me, as you know already. Both on the left, who are like the real leftists, you know, and also on the right, obviously. So, you know, I don't want those people to ever like clip something like that out of context and then blast it out into the fucking universe to be like, Hasan compares his workplace conditions to fucking, you know, a guy who's like literally pissing in a bottle in a distribution facility. No jokes.
I apologize. I will never joke again to you.
You know this. You know this better than anyone else. Leftism is when no jokes. And if you've never laughed, that's communism.
That makes that's really sad, Hasan. You shouldn't be expanding the reach of that message. Leftism is about having a good time and making sure everyone else can have a good time.
Thank you. That's literally at the heart of my rhetoric, my commentary, my worldview. It's always laughable whenever people are like, this guy fucking, this piece of shit. Like, no, I love hedonism. I want everyone to be able to fucking enjoy nice things, okay? That's the point. Otherwise, what's the fucking point? You're not here to suffer and toil the fucking land until your back breaks and you live a life of quiet desperation, only to, you know, improve the profit margins of some fucking dude who you'll never meet ever for the rest of your life, who will never see you on the factory floor or the, you know, white collar job that you have. Sorry. Anyway,
well, it was great talking to you, Hasan. And
pants changing.
Oh yeah, I'm going to a podcast.
Your little wardrobe change here from xQc.
Yeah, I'm going to work.
Anyway,
the life of a streamer.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for coming on. You've already plugged your shit enough. Okay, I'm sick and tired of it.
I'm not gonna do it again.
No. They're blasting your socials and stuff in the chat right now. So cool. Yeah, thank you. And right. I'll have you on soon again.
Okay. Well, you know, I'm around. So enjoy the home.
All right. Bye. Will do.
All right. Later.
Bye.
Bye.
She's nice. Does she have a real job? Is it like a
real job? What does that mean?
I mean, well, what we're doing now is not a real job. I mean, like is she like a...
She's a writer. She's a writer for Jacobin.